fellow romance readers, I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and this is Post-Book Depression. You know that feeling you get when you finish a good book that you didn't want to end?
Have you finished a book and just weren't ready to move on from the story and its beloved characters? You find yourself needing just a little more? This multi-trope romance podcast gives you the opportunity to dig deeper with us into books we love as we discuss all the reasons we can't move on.
Feeling chatty? You can continue the conversation with us on Instagram at Post-Book Depression Podcast or on Facebook in our Post-Book Depression discussion group.
We would be so grateful if you would subscribe to our podcast and take a moment to leave a review.
Are you ready? Let's discuss.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be discussing All the Missing Pieces by Cowles.
The first few minutes we're going to do a brief review of the story without any spoilers. Then we are going to shift into a deeper book discussion. That's going to include lots of spoilers, but don't worry, we are going to let you know before we do shift over into that deeper book discussion.
That's right. So before we dive in, Amy, tell us a little bit about this story.
A young woman hosts a crime podcast that she uses to help solve cold cases, which she started after someone close to her was abducted. When she arrives in a small town to start at the beginning of a series of crimes that were committed, she doesn't plan on the attraction and the draw she has for the town sheriff. Sarah, what did you...
We're start over. We're going to have to start over. Sorry, you
do I
got
have lipstick. I almost asked you, do I have lipstick?
Yeah, you do. I was sitting there like, is that a shadow? I didn't want to stop you until I knew.
Little, like...
Yeah, I didn't want to stop you until I knew for sure, and I was like, she does. We're going to have to stop that. Because I don't know if that's... Yeah, I didn't know if it was going to show up, and I didn't want to risk it.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, let's hit it.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be discussing All the Missing Pieces.
You said discussing. One more time.
My lisp is showing. Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be discussing All the Missing Pieces by Cowles.
The first few minutes we're going to do a brief review of the story without any spoilers. Then we are going to shift into a deeper book discussion that's going to include lots of spoilers. But don't worry, we are going to let you know before we do shift into that deeper book discussion.
That's right. So before we jump in, Amy, tell us a little bit about the story.
A young woman hosts a crime podcast that she uses to help solve cold cases, which she started after someone close to her was abducted. When she arrives in a small town to start at the beginning of a series of crimes that were committed, she doesn't plan on the attraction and the draw she has for the town sheriff. Sarah, what did you think about All the Missing Pieces?
I love this story. I'm a sucker for Mr. Ballen's podcast, and it was giving off those vibes to me. This story was just, I was just captivated, from the get-go, which, I mean, obviously, if you've read it. I love Cowles. I love how she's able to quickly draw me into a story, and she did it again with this one. I was here for the mystery of it.
Romance, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Suspense thrillers, those are my top tier book tropes.
Yep.
And when you mix them together, I'm here for it. It's a win for me. So I had a real good time reading this story. Yeah. I loved it so much. Let's get into those ratings. Angst.
I did a 2.
1.5 for me.
Yeah.
The suspense portions of the story were really what drove me, but it's not overly angsty.
Right.
Humor.
Like a 1.
I did a 1 too.
Yeah.
Some comedic moments. Spiciness.
1.25.
I did 2.5. That's probably
really?
high. Yeah, I think it's probably high, but there were enough scenes.
There's some good tension.
Yeah, so, I'll leave it at 2.5. It's probably high, but I'm going to leave it.
I'm trying to think if I'm low.
They were descriptive, the ones that were in there. Not overly so, but enough to bump it up a smidge. Anyway, it's fine. Tears.
0.25.
I did 1. So we were close. I didn't cry, but the basis for the suspense part of the story is very sad.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole premise of the story is very
pretty
weighty.
sad. I'm going to change mine right now. I'm not going to jump to a 1. I'm going to say 0.75, but I'm rethinking that now, and I'm like, did I rate this the way I should?
Yeah, I feel like 0.75 is fair for you.
The story overall, no, it's sad. It's sad. I'll go 0.75. We'll keep it there. I really missed the mark on that, guys.
Overall
it was a 4.25. I love
Same
this
for
story.
Me. Catherine is a solid author. I enjoy her writing a lot. Mm-hmm. This was a fast, easy read for me, and it kept me engaged through the entire story.
And it has a lovely cover.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's what drew me into this story was the gorgeous cover. And if there are multiple covers out at the time you were listening to this, it has a beautiful pink sky, or the van is pink, and there's just beautiful sky. It's
gorgeous.
It's lovely. That concludes our spoiler-free quick review of this story. Now we're going to shift into a deeper book discussion that's going to include lots of spoilers. So if you haven't read this story, we encourage you to go check that out and then come back and join us on our discussion. We would love to hear from you on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Postbook Depression Podcast, on Facebook in our Postbook Depression discussion group, and you can email us at postbookdepressionpodcast@gmail.com. We begin this story with Ridley and Avery, a set of twins that are headed to their final college night, last hurrah party.
Yes.
Out and about, and Avery's never gone to a party before, and Ridley's really encouraging her to get out and just kind of be a young person and enjoy the social aspects of it. This is quite an intense opener. Let's dig in.
Let's dig in. Okay, well, first I have to say, I mentioned in our quick review that I loved the cover.
Mm-hmm.
Friend, I went into the story. You sent it. I love the cover. I didn't even read what it was about. I was like, Catherine Cowles, yeah, I'm here. Let's do this. I love the cover. I did not know what the story was going to entail. So color me surprised.
No doubt.
When Avery goes missing.
Doesn't make it, yeah.
Doesn't make it. What? I was so sucked into this story instantly. I was like, oh, this is serious. I should have probably read the description to prepare myself. But I didn't. Yeah, wow.
What an opener.
What an opener. All kinds of fears unlocked. Just, it's just, yeah, it was intense.
The night that transpires does ultimately lead Ridley to kind of focus her career on crime and helping to solve crime in a very unique way with the crime podcast, which as podcasters, I loved that aspect of this story. I found it very fascinating. If I did not do a romance book discussion podcast, sign me up for a true crime podcast.
You would solve crimes?
I would love it if I could.
I think I would be... Yeah, okay, well, you're like only murders in the building.
Yes.
Yeah, if I could have Steve Martin and Martin Short working along with me, I would be down for it, maybe. I was really taken by her profession and what she's able to do. I love the take on it because I do feel like we are in that everybody is a sucker for a crime podcast or a true crime show. I don't know. What does that say about us as a society? It's very alarming. I myself am a sucker for Mr. Ballin. So I did think the podcast side of it was very interesting, especially because she helps catch people.
Yes.
I mean, she's kind of like an FBI profiler, but she's not for the FBI. Yeah. She's a podcaster.
Very impressive.
I know.
She's able to take the work that she does and the information that she collects, but she also has this collection of listeners that really rallies behind her and helps her solve these crimes by giving their input and giving feedback. And she does interviews and finds things that the FBI and other people of service have overlooked or maybe didn't give enough effort to.
I know. And it's so interesting. I do have to say there is a point that it is kind of briefly touched on that she could ruffle some feathers.
Oh, 100%.
And I could see if this was now Ridley, I'm all for. I'm like, yeah, girl, you go out there, you have your podcast and you stop these monsters. If this was a real life situation, I would probably lean more towards maybe let's let the professionals. But
it's almost like an investigative journalist.
It is an investigative journalist, but also she's so respectful and she's so smart because one of the things, like at one point she was doing a live and I thought to myself, that's so interesting to me that she would do that. You would think after what happened to her sister, she would take more precautions. And then you find out she does. She never posts where she's at until she's gone. She tries not to put any personal information out there, really. She doesn't even use her birth name.
Yeah.
And she doesn't show her face a lot on camera. So I thought, okay, I love how the author really kind of created this character to be smart about what she's doing.
Absolutely.
That way you can kind of say, okay, here's this person that's doing something that's extremely dangerous. But she's taking a lot of proper precautions to ensure her safety to the best of her ability. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I love her character. I love what she does, and I admire her.
I agree. I found it very fascinating. I learned a lot just from reading this story. I found it very intriguing, the different things that she does and how she comes to solve these crimes. And she impressed me for sure.
Yeah, it's a little sad when you think about how many little details that people don't pick up on when they're investigating it. And I wonder why that is, but we won't delve into it.
Probably because we're on the outside looking in, so
Yeah.
they seem obvious to us. Ridley arrives in this small town, the town that Emerson, the reason she's coming to this small town, this young woman, Emerson, who had been the very first of what she suspects is a series of crimes that are tied together. And she's really holding the fact that they are tied together, I think it's 23 or something like that, different crimes. She's holding that close to the vest. She hasn't really exposed that all of the things that she knows about Hal or suspects that they're tied together. And so she has the hopes of coming to Emerson, where she believes it all began with this it started out with abduction or even serial assaultant, which turns into serial killer.
Right.
In the end. And so she's come to this small town to try and investigate further and get more research and hopefully talk to Emerson. I love how respectful, like you said, Ridley is with anybody that's involved in any of these crimes. Obviously, she has gone through it and understands that side of it. So when she meets Colt for the first time, it's very comedic to me, first of all. Well, let's just break down their meet cute, because it's entertaining.
Yes, there's a disgruntled woman in the parking lot because there is a cat, by golly, in her van, and she's ready to bust out some windows. This little old lady is just, like, she wants justice. She wants this cat out, and Colt, who is the sheriff there, he's sheriff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sheriff there is just trying to calm her down. I guess this is a regular occurrence for this lady to get upset about things.
Passionate. She's passionate.
She is passionate. And I love Ridley walking up on this because she finds it comical. One,
she's watching before they notice she's there.
And her cat, who is just so funny, Tater.
She's three-legged.
She's three-legged. She's mean. She'll hiss at you. She has air, and so she lets her know. But I love how when she lets them know that she has air, and he gets mad and says, "You should put a sign." She's like this one, like, right here. So it was so funny how the little old lady, kind of very quickly flips the script and was like, "Yes, okay, everything's good," and then is kind of siding with her and just goes on about her way to stir up probably more trouble like that throughout the day. It's so funny. I mean, he's instantly attracted to her. Kind of wants to verbally spar with her a little bit. That scene was amazing.
I loved it too. And just the fact that they don't really start off on the best of terms. And she's going to have a working relationship with him. She doesn't know it at the time until she realizes he's the sheriff. So that just made me smile. That whole scene was just a delight. Let's talk about, we learn pretty quickly into the story that Colt the sheriff is Emerson's brother.
Right.
Her older brother. To talk about this relationship, we have to talk about the fact that Emerson, we did mention that she was suspected at being the very first in being one of the ones first attacked. She survived. She actually escaped, and what had transpired, she was finishing up her tennis practice and waiting for Colt to come and pick her up, and he was late. That is when she was abducted, and she did manage to escape that. Of course, Colt is living with all this guilt because he was late. This has been many years in the making. It's just festered. As you would expect, he's very overprotective of Emerson. But on that point, because of the tragedy that she lived through, she's very terrified. She has a lot of anxiety. She does not leave the house. She is only comfortable leaving the house or in the yard with Colt or Colt's best friend, Trey. Let's just unpack this whole relationship between the two of them.
She has a lot of reasons to live in fear because they never caught the person who had taken her. She was extremely lucky. I mean, she was taken and then she jumped out of the back. I mean, still kind of tied, was injured from the fall. Extremely lucky, but she was also 16 and it traumatized her for the next decade. Extreme agoraphobia. So I kind of understand why Colt feels this intense need to protect her. When he finds out what Ridley is doing in town, that protection goes into overdrive of stay away, do not try to talk to her, do not bring this up, why are you doing this, you need to go. He
makes a lot of judgmental decisions and assumptions about Ridley in those moments.
He does. And sometimes I get so frustrated when we read stories where characters just immediately make these assumptions and they think they have a person pegged, and they could not be further from the truth. But I also think if this was a real life situation, this is somebody that you are fiercely protective of, you're probably not going to be thinking rationally.
Yes.
I don't need to know all the details of who you are. All I know is that this is what I've heard you're here for. That's all I need to know. Full stop. We don't need to go any further. You need to go. So I do kind of understand a little bit of where he's coming from. I probably in that situation, if this was real life, wouldn't be like, oh, you're doing that? Oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that together, shall we?
I'll help you.
However, given the nature of what we know he does pull out Emerson's case every year. He does look through it. You think maybe he would say, can we keep Emerson out of this? But I'm interested to know what you feel like you have. Could we collaborate and see what facts you've kind of collected through your investigation?
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen until later.
No, that also sets the tone for their frenemies.
Yeah.
Banter situation.
He doesn't know if he wants to yell at her or kiss her.
Just delightful. It is, in fact, Trey, Colt's best friend, that Ridley wins over first. When he kind of gets wind of the fact, well, he point blank asks her about her situation and why she's here. And for the first time, because she doesn't open up about her history with her sister or much like that on the podcast. And she doesn't share that except on a need-to-know basis when she's really feeling like she needs to connect with a witness or a victim. And so when Trey asks her, she actually opens up to him about what happened. And that's when he was able to be favorable to her. I loved their banter, by the way, too.
Oh, I did, too.
The friendship banter. It was great.
I know. I did, too.
As she's moving forward in her investigation, she starts finding folks that are willing to talk to her. I mean, it's a small town, so her witness list is very small.
Yeah.
Or her interview list is very small. And she has secured interviews with Grady Smith and Coach Kerr, two people back in the day. Coach Kerr was Emerson's coach at the time, the tennis coach, and Grady was the groundskeeper of the grounds where she was abducted. So these are the only two people at this point that have been willing to talk to Ridley. Let's talk about these two suspects.
Well, Coach Kerr comes off very, I don't want to say charming. He's not charming, but like he would try to charm somebody. It seemed, I don't know, he has one of those, yes, I want to be helpful and this and that.
I want to know your opinion on your suspicions of each of these characters when she's interviewing. What were you thinking in regards to their guilt or non-guilt in Emerson's case?
Coach Kerr gave me weird vibes immediately. He felt too willing, and I just got, something's weird with him, and that was all I could feel. And then later on, I was like, oh.
Well, when he was so willing at first
until he saw Grady.
Yes. And then he backed up, and I thought, he's guilty of something. It is not this.
Agreed. That I 100% agree. Grady, I thought that would be too obvious.
Yeah, same. I agree. Let's shift over to talk about Ridley's podcast team, Baker and Sully. Let's talk about the dynamic amongst the three of them. I felt like her and Sully had a really great working relationship together. I feel like Baker was maybe designed to be a red herring, even though it seemed obvious that he probably wasn't going to be involved. But we had to have this character that we didn't like and were rooting against. And it also, in the end, it drove her to go out on her own when she finally got out from under his ownership. So let's talk about this podcast team and their dynamic.
Well, I didn't like Baker. I could tell when she was dodging his calls that he was not a boss that was easy to work with and probably would throw a lot of, I do this for you, so you have to do this for me kind of thing.
Stipulations, quid pro quo.
Yeah, I didn't like that. Sully, I loved their dynamic. I love that he was always trying to check in with her and just, I don't know, almost in a way a father figure to her because her dad had disconnected so much from her after losing her sister. You know, her parents weren't backing her anymore. Her mom went into a whole state of not able to really kind of cope or live, and her dad just almost like he could not connect with her anymore because he was so afraid of losing her. I feel like Sully kind of helped fill a little bit of that void. So I always liked when they were chatting. He seemed
I did
really
too.
pleasant.
He was very supportive of her, always encouraging whenever he could see that Baker was kind of beating down her spirit and her enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So I really vibed with his support of her.
Agree.
Let's spend a few minutes talking about Ridley and Colt's relationship as it's growing here. They obviously have an attraction to one another. That's undeniable. They finally are talking about giving into that when Trey beats him over the head figuratively and makes him see that she's not all these assumptions that he's made, and he's starting to come around. They start talking about having this little frenemies with benefits relationship, and we know how those always turn out. Let's talk about their relationship and how it develops.
I love how people think that they can just enjoy the benefits and the perks and nothing. I mean, if it were real life, okay, but in a story, it's like somebody is catching feelings. Come on. And we know it's going to be both of you all. So I just think it's comical at this point. When I read them, I'm like, well, we know how that's going to end up. It was comical that they were like, okay, let's just acknowledge that we're attracted to each other and let's just do something about it while I'm here in town.
I loved the scene before they get to this point where he's coming out to confront her at her little RV. No, side note, I'm going to come back to that scene. Let's talk about this RV. I want to see it.
The travel van.
Yes, the travel van. I want to see it in real life.
I do too, because I've seen a VW bug and I'm trying to
figure
out how
so much stuff that she had packed in that thing.
I know.
It was impressive.
Some of these newer vans, these travel vans, I'm like, those are taller ceilings. I could see, but a VW, I'm like, how? I need to see this. How does this work?
I should have gone on a deep dive on videos or something, TikTok Reels, something. See if we can find one. We'll do that and see what we can investigate. Okay, back to the scene. She's taking a shower, which prompted that because she's got the shower attached to the outside. Yeah. And he comes to question her, and she just has a towel on, and she's like, apparently you can't handle nudity or skin, so let me go put some clothes on. He's so embarrassed. I love that little scene.
Well, I did get a little sneak peek because the shower curtain kind of blows, so I'm sure he was a little flustered with himself at the moment.
Yeah. Shifting over to a more serious tone, let's talk about the scene where Ridley gets assaulted. She's been doing some investigation. This is right after Colt has sent her a picnic basket, kind of his means of an apology, and she's been eating the cheese and going through all of her notes and things, and she feels a presence there. Somebody's watching her. She's very alert all the time. Yeah. She ends up getting assaulted. Let's talk about this scene.
This was terrifying. I don't really want to talk about it.
We don't have to spend much time on it other than...
As a female that I fear the being out in public. This was scary. She's so exposed out there. He says that. He's like, you're exposed out here. Mm-hmm. You know?
And there was one other campsite that had been booked, and that was a red flag the whole time.
Well, I have to say, I kind of missed that flag.
Well, I mean, okay, let me just say, I didn't know it was going to be the assaulter, but I was on alert.
Yeah, well,
because they mentioned it multiple times.
After the assault, yes. Okay. I don't know.
You were in your happy bubble.
I was trying to stay there. I get so scared, guys. So anyway, her assault, that was terrifying and it was intense.
I didn't put her in the hospital.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to be that intense. And I didn't expect the vandalism to her van either.
Oh, me neither.
I did not see that one.
I was appreciative of the fact that she had the one drawer that she could lock very well. It wasn't kind of an elementary lock. It was a heavy duty one, thank goodness, because it protected some of the more important documents that she had in her investigation. But her assault does put her in the hospital, which brings her to the point where she's in need of a caretaker. Yeah. I'm just loving all these little tropes, these micro tropes being thrown in this story. And of course, Colt being there. But let me back up and say Baker comes. He gets wind of it. And he's just stomping all over everything in the hospital room. And Colt, I just love how he just steps in and defends and protects. And she's going to stay with me.
Yeah, it was ick vibes when Baker was trying to get her to stay with him. I thought, who do you think you are? Gross. Go away. I love her too, though, for saying, no, I'm not doing that. She was not going to stay with Baker. It wasn't she felt any pressure. And I love that about Ridley's personality. She's not making a choice that she doesn't want to make.
Right. It is the fact that she has this forced proximity staying in his home with him. That's when the frenemies with benefits starts for them. And of course, just magnifies from there.
Yeah.
In the midst of all of this, they're still investigating some of the people that she has interviewed, and it comes to light that Coach Kerr, she catches something on the convenience store surveillance video that he is wearing shorts and a t-shirt in what was a very cold day, and there's a coat of his or a jacket in the back seat, and so she starts questioning why he would be out there not even visibly shivering or being cold when there was a jacket. And so this kind of steamrolls into them finding and interviewing him, investigating a little further, and discovering he does in fact have an alibi to the night of Emerson's abduction. And it turns out it was not him, but he did have, some sins he was trying to cover up, having an affair with an underage student.
Yeah. Ew. I mean, ew. And the fact that he tries to justify that, 17 is legal in other states. They're like, yeah, well, not here, buddy. And he doesn't want his wife to find out. I just thought, really? You're facing potential jail time, so maybe that's the least of your concerns at this point. He was just ooey.
Yeah, and I only bring him up because up till this point, really through this whole investigation, there's really not a lot of suspects that have been brought in. The reader really doesn't have any kind of perspective of characters to pull from. And at this point in the story, I'm still thinking it's somebody we have not met yet or have not been introduced to yet. Mm-hmm. That's really the only reason I bring in Coach Kerr and his alibi, because he is now obviously not on the docket for being the one with Emerson's abduction.
Okay, I have to tell you who I thought it was.
Okay.
I thought it was the owner of the coffee shop.
Okay, let's back up to that, because I did too. Initially, the very first scene we met, I forgot about him.
Yes.
Okay, yes. I wrote in my notes, it's got to be him.
It's got to be him.
Because
and
of
then
his reaction to her.
Yes, and then I thought, well, maybe not. And then I thought, oh, they're trying to make us think it's Coach. And then when it wasn't Coach, because maybe it is Coach. And then when it wasn't Coach, I was like, it's gotta be him. It has to be him. Yeah.
They never brought him back around, so.
No, it wasn't him. Spoiler alert, it wasn't him. But I had in my head, it's going to circle around to that guy.
You're right.
It's gotta be him.
Yeah. I forgot about him. She starts receiving some really threatening Instagram comments that has her pretty concerned. She's starting to kind of question if Baker is maybe the mastermind behind those. Maybe he's manipulating her. And so she agrees to meet him at a bar. She wants to have a conversation with him, look him in the eyes, and know whether or not he's lying to her. And of course, Colt is having reservations about her interacting with him.
Yep.
Let's talk about the scene in the bar.
I was with Colt.
Yeah.
I wanted him to be sitting right next to her. I was thinking something's going to happen. A waitress or a waiter, somebody's going to get in your line of sight, and then she's going to be gone.
Oh,
because then at that point I was like, is it Baker? But then I was like, that's too obvious.
Yeah.
So the way that whole scene played out, I was really happy because nothing of what I expected to happen happened, and I loved that.
Me
because
too.
I really thought something's going to happen, and he's going to miss it for some little reason. So I was glad that the author didn't do that, because that's where my mind went. I think I would have been a little disappointed if I had been right.
I was bracing for impact too, fully expecting something like that to happen, and was pleasantly surprised when that was not the case. In fact, she used that opportunity to quit. She's not working for him anymore. She's going to go off on her own, do her own thing. She's not going to be threatened by him anymore, and I was so proud of her in that moment. Know. Good for her. She starts her own podcast, and she talks to Emerson. They've been kind of forming a friendship through her frenemies with benefits relationship with Colt. So they've spent more time together. Also, you definitely could pick up on the fact that her and Trey were...
I need that story.
I know.
The whole time I thought, man,
I did too. I thought Sarah's going to want that story.
I want that story. I want it.
Yeah. Emerson agrees to be interviewed. And this is kind of the big transition moment in the story where Emerson comes, she agrees to be interviewed, but it also allows Ridley the opportunity to tell her own story. And that was one of the key points that Emerson made to her about having her own podcast. And she was worried about how is she going to do this and start over and still get existing listeners to continue on and new listeners to buy in. And that was what Emerson suggested, was we need to hear your story. And so she takes some time in her van and just records her entire story. I loved the scene. Love's probably not the right word, but I enjoyed just through Colt's perspective of her being in the van and him being on the outside and him just having all this anxiety. Is she okay? I want to be there to support her. And then when she comes in and she tells him, I just need tonight. And the fact that he gave her that, I had a lot of respect for him in that moment.
Yeah. That was a very heavy thing to unpack. So I can't even imagine like the emotional drop, like almost an adrenaline drop. But
She's actually doing the interview with Emerson when Colt stops by and is starting to get a little bit upset because he doesn't want things to be stirred up for Emerson. She's made all this progress, and so things start to kind of get riled up between her and Ridley. And so she takes the conversation with him out into the backyard. They start to communicate, importantly enough. And once she calms him down, he goes back inside to start to try and make amends with Emerson and apologize for the way he behaved. And this is the scene where she gets abducted. Let's talk about the scene.
this was so startling because they took a little bit to kind of talk through everything inside, and then Trey comes inside and they realize that she's gone. I just kept thinking, how much time has passed? How much time has passed?
Yes.
How much time has passed?
Yes, I was thinking that too.
But he realizes very quickly she was drug off and that she's been taken. This is where the angst for me really kicked in for this story, because I didn't find it angsty up until this point. I mean, the content is, but this is where my anxiety shot through the roof, because I thought, how long is this going to last? How are they going to find her? Like, you know, they are going to find her,
Yeah.
but, and also we didn't know who.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, I didn't have a single clue as to who.
Yeah, it wasn't until she was one-on-one with Sully in the van that kind of had the wool removed from my eyes. And I was so shocked and disappointed.
I know.
Because I liked his character so much and how supportive he was of her. I just was blindsided by this.
I'm going to tell you, there was one for like a split fraction of a second. I thought, oh, what if it's Sully? And then I thought, that's ridiculous. So when it finally turned out that it was him, I was disappointed. However, I wasn't, because I was like, you didn't know he was wearing old man makeup.
Yeah, it's true. Yes.
So the dude really put some thought into it. He's the other guy at the camp, and he has been there the entire time. Now, Amy, when I tell you that it blew my mind, first of all, one, he was impressed with her because she found 23. But he informs her that there was it 34, 35? It was like in the 30s, which that was just a bit overwhelming to me. But what he does, how he travels the nation, helping athletes, it's the perfect, and it's terrifying.
It is very terrifying.
It's terrifying. I'm like, okay, well, that was very clever that you wrote that, and that is absolutely terrifying to me. Thank you for those nightmares, Catherine Cowles. Yeah, it was scary. It was scary.
I did not see that coming at all. I like I said earlier, I really felt it was going to be somebody that we had not met yet. And or the coffee shop guy, like you mentioned, he was on the radar. But in the end, I still just was not sure. And I knew it was going to be revealed. And obviously, it was going to be somebody that we'd already met. I feel like readers are robbed whenever it's someone you haven't met yet. It seems like a little bit of an unresolved contract between you and the author. So, yeah, I was disappointed in the fact that I really liked his character, but good on you, Catherine Cowles, for pulling one over on me.
But I love it. I love an author who can do that, because I find
Me
it
too.
very kind of a letdown, like, I figured it out.
Yeah.
I don't want to figure it out. I want somebody to really, like, surprise me. I like to be surprised.
And she did.
Yeah.
All right, let's round it out with our HEA, or Happily Ever After.
I love how she closed the story. Obviously, Colt and Ridley, they stay together. I love the closure that her family has. She really, by solving this case of her sister's abduction and what all had transpired that night, she's able to give closure to her parents. And it really brings her parents back into her life to be active participants. That, to me, I love that she gets Colt.
Yeah.
That's kind of a bonus. But it was incredible to see that relationship restored, and I was so thankful for that.
Me too.
That was what I loved about the Happily Ever After personally, because I felt like it's all the way around. It's in the romantic side, but it's also for your family and
not just her finding healing emotionally, mentally, but her parents as well, because they were deeply affected by what had transpired to her sister Avery. So I also found that to be very rewarding.
I couldn't agree more. Well, that concludes our discussion of all the missing pieces. We hope you enjoyed this episode and want to continue the discussion with us. You can hit us up on Instagram at Postbook Depression Podcast or on Facebook at our Postbook Depression discussion page. You can also email us at postbookdepressionpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, keep reading.